Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be going over the details of the minimum credit requirements when it comes to the VA loan. There's a lot of very confusing information out there that this is the credit score or this is the credit score or these are the minimum requirements for to get a VA loan. But honestly, with all the conflicting information, it's very confusing as to what the actual answer is. So I'm hopefully going to clear all that information up, and we're pulling all this information from what's called the VA Lenders Handbook 26-7. This is a document that governs how all VA loans are done from lender to lender. Now the thing is, when every lender is able to do the VA loan, they may impose extra requirements on top of what the VA loan allows. It's a lot like federal laws versus state laws. They can't be any less conservative than the federal law, but they can be more conservative with the federal law. So that's kind of like the best way to describe how the VA handbook works in relation to how the VA loan is ran. And in addition to that, how lenders are very different or can be very different from lender to lender when it comes to the VA loan. Sometimes you're being denied for a VA loan and it has nothing to do with the VA loan itself. It just has to do something specific to that lender. And again, those are called lender overlays. I'll do a separate video in regards to lender overlays and some of the most common types of lender overlays. But today we're gonna just focus on credit requirements, okay? So the big question that everyone always has is, what is the minimum credit score for the VA loan? That is the biggest question. So the most common answer that you'll hear is about 580, sometimes 620, sometimes 640. Some lenders can go as high as 680 for their minimum credit score requirement, meaning that if your minimum or your middle credit score is not at least this amount or higher, then that means you may not be able to get a VA loan with that specific lender. So typically, there's three credit scores that we're looking at: TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. And depending on whichever one of those three scores is in the middle, so it could be a 640, a 625, and a 650. The 640 is the middle number, and that's generally what most lenders look at for what the qualifying score is going to be. And from there, does that meet their minimum requirement for the VA loan or not? That's the question. Again, what is the actual answer? The actual answer per the VA Lenders Handbook is that the VA does not impose a minimum credit score for the VA loan. There's no minimum credit score, actually. And you can have basically any credit score that you want, but it doesn't necessarily mean it keeps you from having a VA loan. Now, I want to be very careful when I say this, is that just because you have a high credit score doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a VA loan. In addition to that, just because you have a low credit score doesn't necessarily mean you can't get a VA loan. I've seen it both ways in the clients I've seen over the 600 VA loans I've done. I've seen someone who had a 740 credit score and couldn't move forward with the VA loan because of there's some other issues with their credit. I've seen people with a 506, 567 credit score and still be able to move forward with the VA loan. So it really depends. And the question is, what does it depend on? For the most part, the reason why the Department of Veteran Affairs, when they made the VA home loan, why they didn't put a minimum credit score is because they understand the lifestyle of a military family, with dealing with deployment schedules, dealing with family, dealing with how to coordinate in between. The last thing that's on your mind, especially while you're out there serving, is what's paying the debts on your credit score. You're really, as someone who has served in the military, who've been on submarine and deployments, I wasn't really worried about my credit score while I was underway. Honestly, I didn't have any way to really deal with it because I was on a submarine. I was really worried about the people to the left of me and the right of me, and making sure someone had my back. And I was doing the same thing for the other people as well. So that's kind of and they understood that side and that impact on military families, and understanding that is not the highest priority. So what they did instead was they made the requirement much less about the credit score, but more about credit history. Okay, so credit history is the most important piece, because and this applies to any really loan program, because when it comes to how you manage your debts on your credit report as well as your credit history, then if you do those things, it then reflects on your credit score, and then your credit score really is a grade on how you've been managing those two things: your credit management as well as credit history. So really your credit scores are just a grade of what we really need to look at. So if you're doing all the right things, if you're doing things at a minimum, paying the bills on time, making sure you're making minimum payments, and you're keeping your credit card below the balance, really you should be in the mid 600s pretty easily. Now, you can bring the credit balances down, pay the stuff on time, and generally it'd be easy to get into the 700s pretty easily. So it just depends on what's going on. Now, going back to the credit history piece, now the main thing when it comes to credit history is that think about what you're doing in regards to getting a mortgage, right? You are asking for a six-figure loan that you're going to make a monthly payment on to include interest that you're going to make for 30 years. Now imagine yourself being in that situation where you are being asked a six-figure loan to give to someone that you don't know anything about, and they're going to go buy a house, and on that loan they're going to make a monthly payment for the next 30 years, right? So that it sounds really risky. And what do you need to know about this person to make sure that they can pay this debt on time? One of the main things is, yes, it's going to be, how much do they make, income, assets, things like that. But the other big important piece is, how have you managed past debts that are similar to this? Now, unless you've bought a house before or you're a first-time home buyer, the only way to judge if you can pay these debts on time is what you've done in the past with auto loans, credit cards, student loans, personal loans, things like that. So the better that history looks, the better your chances that your credit score is going to improve slowly and over time because of that solid history, and that reflects on your credit score. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes you have a series of bad mistakes on your credit report. So the reason why the VA says we're going to look at the last 12 months of history is that just because you've had a history, let's say in 2023, the entire 2023 you were struggling, you had a bunch of late payments, but by the end of 2023 you got everything safe and stable, and now you're in a better financial position, and you spent the entirety of 2024 super clean. Sure, the credit score didn't go up very much, but you stopped it from going down, and it's maintained, and there's been no late payments. In that case, in that situation, there's a very strong chance you're going to be able to get a VA loan because the last 12 months of history has been very, very clean. So it's kind of like recovering from an addiction, right? Yes, you could have had a history of bad stuff, but as long as you maintained the next 12 months of good history, then what's going to happen is that your credit score stops going down, and then slowly it starts going back up. And then the more time since those bad remarks on your credit report, the faster your credit score will go up and higher it will go. So that's the main thing when it comes to looking at the credit profile of getting a VA loan, is that we're not so much concerned about the credit scores per se, but we're really looking at the credit history, okay, and how you've been managing your debts. Now, there are times where, because of where your credit's at, maybe buying a house doesn't make the most sense because you're maybe in too much debt. If you're in a situation where finances are already tight, unfortunately buying a house may make things worse, even if you can afford it, because buying a house is another responsibility. It's not like you get to this level and then it gets a lot easier. It actually doesn't. It's actually just as much as responsibility, if not more, when you buy and own your own home. So I'll be very careful to look at your finances and making sure that you're making the right decision for your finances, and maybe now is not the right time. Maybe we got to work on your finances, and that's what I've helped a lot of clients do. Is we've got together, we do something called a soft pre-approval, and we take a look at where your finances are at in relation to buying a house. Maybe you're a lot closer than you think you are. Maybe you're a lot further than, or maybe you didn't have any knowledge of where you're at. So we can give you a lot more surgical plan to make sure your money's being spent in the right direction when it comes to improving your credit history and your credit scores. So that's the main thing when it comes to your minimum credit requirements. Now, if you have a bankruptcy, foreclosure, a short sale, bankruptcy specifically, what's nice about the VA loan is on those big derogatory life events, they're a lot more lenient compared to all the other home loan programs. And as well as the credit score requirements. A lot of the other home loan programs have credit score requirements, specifically conventional and FHA, USDA. Those are the most common home loan programs. They generally do have some kind of minimum credit score requirement. And then in addition to that, the lower your credit score goes, it will impact your rate negatively, which means either it will go higher or a specific rate is going to significantly cost more, making it cost more to buy a house. So now it depends. Again, the first thing is, can you buy a house, right? Based on the credit history. The next question to ask is, how does it impact your affordability, right? So depending on those two things, the first question, and how it leads us to the next, is what we're trying to step through. Okay, it's not. And so if you guys are in a situation where you really don't understand your credit and how it actually works, or you're just not sure where you're at when it comes to buying a house, the best thing to do is get in touch. Let's schedule a chat and see about where you're at right now. Maybe we do that soft pre-approval and kind of see what's going on. We do like a soft pull and make sure that, you know, at least we can shine a light on things that are causing your score to go down. We can pinpoint things that are, hey, if you're doing this, this is what's happening. These are things that are reported on your credit report, especially if you feel like you're doing all the right things, but your score for some reason is staying the same. Then that's a cause to kind of figure out what's going on with your credit report, because there could be something reporting that you have no idea of, and that's really unfortunate to be in that position if you're continuously always working really hard. So we want to make sure your money is being spent in the right location, because credit's a very kind of almost one of those really hard things to kind of figure out, because there's so much information, as well as things that are telling you to do this, but when you really should be doing this. So, but yeah, that's the main thing when it comes to the credit requirements for a VA loan, is that it is a lot more lenient compared to all the other home loan programs. To kind of explain those big derogatory events, you know, Chapter 7, you just have to wait 2 years from the discharge date, then you can use your VA loan. Chapter 13, once you've made 12 months of Chapter 13 payments, then you get a letter from the judge, then you can move forward with the VA loan. You don't have to wait until your Chapter 13 is done and then get a VA loan. You can actually just make 12, once you've made 12 consecutive payments, then I get a letter from the judge, then you're good to go. A foreclosure, generally you have to wait 2 years, and then a short sale, you can almost immediately buy a house on a short sale as long as from the last day you own the house, the mortgage payment was up to date. So, but also the other thing that could happen is collections. A lot of VA clients, I find, want their credit to look as best as possible before they go to a pre-approval. Well, what's crazy about collections is that sometimes paying off a collection doesn't actually help your credit score. I know that sounds really counterintuitive. However, what's funny is that the longer the collection stays on your account, the better it improves your credit score sometimes. So at the end of the day, I would still when you're in the mode of potentially thinking about buying a house, that's really the time you should get with someone or myself. Start chatting with us and figuring out, you know, are you on the right path? If not, then we'll get you right on the right path, and depending on the timeline. So, but that's the main thing when it comes to the credit requirements on a VA loan. It's a lot more fluid. It's a lot more gray. It's just really on a case by case scenario. Luckily, I've been able to do over 600 VA loans in the last, 6, 7, 8 years, where we have a pretty good idea of what you need to do in order to get yourself on the right path to buy a house, or be in a position to be able to do that. So, and then honestly, on the road to that, your finances are going to get better, your credit score is going to get better, and also you have a much better peace of mind of knowledge and understanding of how it all works, that you can actually have more control over your finances and your credit than you think. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'd be happy to help. But that's the main thing. When it comes to the credit score and the credit minimums, really what we're looking at is credit history. So, but there's a lot of other details when it comes to it. Let me know what your specific details, and we'll do our best to help you through. Otherwise, that's all I got. Nuke out.